And then, oh, thank you, Patrick. And then here's our clean network slide. Thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate that. Great. Well, actually, with that, that was pretty much it in terms of my introductions. I do want to just mention, however, that the Clean Network, we do have weekly clean calls on Tuesdays, usually at 1 p.m. Eastern, always at 1 p.m. Eastern, and then you can do the calculations backwards from there wherever you are. And we are looking for folks, we're always looking for folks to present about their work in there, and it's a great place to talk about work, get feedback, or just sort of market what you're doing. So I know Patrick is our Clean Fellow and was also a convener on this session, and he is here today and would be interested if anyone, he schedules the Clean Call presentation. So if anyone here would be interested in presenting on a Clean Call about their work, please reach out to Patrick. I don't know if Patrick, you'd be willing to put your email in the chat for folks. Thanks. And with that, I'm going to actually let our conveners introduce themselves. So Patrick, maybe just since I just talked about you, you could do a short introduction, and then we'll have, we have also Bonnie and Emily were also conveners on our sessions here, so they'll go next. Patrick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I am Patrick Chandler. I am a PhD student at the University of Colorado Boulder, and my research focuses on art science partnerships that aim to catalyze community action on environmental and social justice. And again, also please contact me if you would like to present for the Clean Network.
Great, thank you so much. Bonnie, would you mind introducing yourself, just since you were also just talking? You're the next one in my list here.
Sounds good. Thank you, Katie. So I'm Bonnie Murray. I am connecting from Southeast Virginia, pretty much the Virginia Beach area, but I'm in Suffolk, and Suffolk is the land of the Nansemond people. So I honor them and thank them for allowing me to be here and work on this land and to get to know a little bit about their culture as well. And so I work at NASA Langley Research Center, which is up in Hampton, Virginia. And I work on a project or an activity, I don't know what the word is to use, but it's focused on engagement of American Indian and Alaskan Native communities. So it has this great acronym because it is NASA. So it's called MAINC, and that's a funding line within NASA, which is MUREP for American Indian Alaskan Native STEM engagement. So thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Bonnie. Emily, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Emily Corrin. I'm currently in the Psychology and Psychiatry department at Stanford, and I've been working to adapt climate communication and entertainment education work together so that we can accelerate the rate of cultural integration for climate solutions. And I'm actually just going to pop up a visual real quick, because one of the things that I keep hearing at the meeting is these, like, I hear lots of stuff about like dystopian stories and how that gets kind of the framing, what the problems are for climate, or people feeling really anxious about where this is going. And I think that from the social psychology standpoint, we actually have a pretty good, at least beginning of a set of solutions. And the one that I want to highlight here is just agency as a story structure. So regardless on what kind of media you're coming from, starting with realistic modeling for where we are now, and setting short-term and long-term goals and periodically reevaluating them to reach your long-term goals is an effective way at building agency. And agency, basically, so if we're looking at the Yale Climate Communication Department's Global Warming 6 Americas, but I mean, we can extrapolate that broader to many different populations. Basically, I'm looking at that top half of the bell curve for people who are already sort of climate interested in a variety of ways, and helping just them improve their success at what they're already trying to do. So please refer back to agency as a story structure as a tool, regardless of your media type. And I look forward to hearing everyone else's ideas and how it's going for them.
Thanks, Emily. So with that, I'm going to do the next 20 or so minutes. I was thinking we would, if we need a little longer, that's fine too. But I was thinking we'd kind of go through each of the presenters who are here, let them share their visuals. And if you could just, even shorter than the Q&A session, if you could just really keep your little presentation of your visual to sort of 1 or 2 minutes. So introduce yourself, introduce your visual and project with that. We'll take 1 or 2 questions if anyone has them. And then I want to spend the last 20 or 30 minutes of this kind of engaging in more discussion, more general thoughts and ideas that we have around all the different awesome projects that were presented on in this session. So with that, I have, I think it's just an order of who was in the room first. So Jim, would you mind talking a little bit about your work? And you had wanted me to share your slide if you still want that. Is that true?
Yep, that'd be great.
Great. Let me pull that up then. Make it bigger here. Oh, that's a little too big. There we go.
Should I get going though on as time is precious on talking? Is that okay?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
So I'm calling in on a collaboration between Lowell School in Washington, D.C. and Mobile Climate Science Lab, which is a program of climatechangeeducation.org. At AGU, we're focusing on, as the subjects of the session is, reaching broad audiences with climate science. Examples is science festivals, large community events, field trip hubs where schools come to see us do things, we particularly put emphasis on reaching and being in the underrepresented communities, and I would say within that, especially African American communities, but certainly not limited to that. We also are in the schools. Something about it, I often will stress the numbers, but maybe you can see a thing of just the pictures of how many people are reached. But it's also, these are families and students that are coming to get science. That's what they're there for. And there's often hundreds of or 100 different subjects being covered. If we're not there, generally climate science is not represented at the largest science events in the country. And I think we'd like to play a role within the climate education community. Katie, please just cut me off if I'm doing, okay? Just hard cut. I'm going to go, but I don't want to go longer, but I want to go, okay?
Well, why don't we, if you're all right with it, why don't we stop there? Because that's been just about a minute 30 or something like that. And I want to make sure if anybody has any questions for you that they can ask those. So does anyone have any questions for Jim? And we'll have time, like I said, towards the end to have more discussion and thoughts and questions as well. So. And you can just unmute yourself or type it in the chat. I'll give it a minute just because I know typing in the chat can take some time. So Jim, if you want to say one more thing while anybody's thinking of a question, or maybe they won't have any, so we can do another minute if you want.
Right, but still cut me off, and I preferred the interaction. I mean, please, I like to present, but I like more to interact. That's much more. We've had a very successful conference, and I wanted more to reflect that. Our primary objective at this conference was to reach out to current climate science that is doing the specific areas of climate science that we have found really, really works well at science festivals. It's not to limit it, but it's what's hands-on and engaging and fun and exciting and stuff we have equipment for. And we've been very successful with of connecting with new programs and tapping with old. So we have at least 6 programs that we've established a good relationship during AGU that we will focus on their programs and do things. So I feel very comfortable about that. We're looking, we can have more. We're following up. There's others that we haven't even seen. I only was able to scour about half of the AGU conference for potential. So there's days that I haven't even been able to look through yet. So that's doing well. So I want to more talk to probably what most of the people here are more the educators to let people know that we were built from the ground up to be collaborative, that we do hands-on science labs and demonstrations. We don't do full-on curriculum or broad, more comprehensive. So we want to highlight great such programs. That's, of course, why we're part of the CLEAN network, because CLEAN is so wonderful, is, people come and they want it, and then schools and people want more. That's where we turn it over to CLEAN, or the CLEAN network, and that's where we turn it over to this. And those who want to participate and might want to be at a science festival and do things, we're great at working with you. And we've had great success with that before. So I want to more, more talk, more let you know, if you see this, you don't have to have all the hands-on stuff. We take care of that. You're welcome to bring what you have that's hands-on. That's even better. but we want good partners that we can relate to. And I think maybe I'll wrap it up with that.
Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate that. Yeah, great little summary of your work as well as some of your engagement at AGU, and I'm glad you've had that. I actually have Mike Hoffman, is because I shared my screen, so all my order got off a little bit, and Mike is next in my ordering here, and I also have his slide. So let me, we'll do him next, which I think works well since I'm already sharing. So let me do that, pull it up, and then Mike, you can take it away.
Thank you, Katie. And for those who aren't aware, our focus is on how climate change is affecting the foods we love and need. And I'm going to use this menu in front of us as an example. I've challenged people many times to simply take a menu, take out your smartphone and search for the ingredients and see if you can find a climate change story behind the ingredients. And without too much trouble, I found 25 stories on this menu. From sourdough, because most grains are going to lose nutritional value in the future. Almonds, I'm starting at the very beginning, almond butter, but almonds are at long-term risk in California because of loss of winter chill. Strawberries in California may decline by about 40% towards the end of the century, again in California, mainly because of more drought and higher temperatures. Coriander actually bolts. It forms seeds when it gets too hot. There is a compounded, and let me just verify, let me step back. So I did this, some of this is in the popular press, some of it's referee journals, but again, it's like just the person on the street doing this. Pomegranate, there's a particular compound called proline that actually changes with higher temperatures. Oats, there's a risk in the UK of increasing incidences of a fungus which produces a toxin that is harmful to humans. Elderflower, elderberry is actually resistant to drought, so it's got some options in the future. Yogurt, hot cows give less milk. Coconut, most coconut are grown at sea level around the world. And please, Katie, stop me whenever.
Yep, and that's 2 minutes, so I am going to stop you, if that's all right. But we'll take any questions if anyone has them for Mike. I think it's so interesting. I love this idea of using food to talk about climate because it's just so ingrained in our everyday lives. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to jump in, unmute yourself, or put it in the chat.
I'll do a quick one for Mike. So meaning to be quick. Mike, particularly if you have people or one of your areas or either the San Francisco Bay Area or Washington, D.C., we would be interested in highlighting what you do and know that, of course, in Bay Area, particularly the drought is the big one. So that's a big hit. In Washington, D.C., of course, you've got a lot of issues that relate to food and things. But those are the places that we most are doing things. So that if you have people doing things, this is great stuff.
Great. I do a lot of public speaking and so on. So I mean, I'm happy to do anything like that. Yes. I'm sorry, who was speaking?
I'm sorry. Yeah, Jim Callahan, climatechangeeducation.org. That'll get you a website right away.
All right.
Great. And that was...
Katie, by the end, we'll all put our contact information in the chat, right?
Yeah, it's a great idea. Actually, we could even, yeah, that's a great idea. Anybody who's comfortable with that, we should definitely do that. That was sort of a minute for questions, but Mike, I will let you know that there's a nice question. As you raise awareness about climate change risks to food systems, are you also promoting alternatives and pathways to action? That's in the chat, and I'm wondering if we could maybe save that to the end, or if you want to try to answer that in the chat, that would be great. I'm going to move on to our next person though, and we'll either come back to it, I'll save this question, or like I said, if you want to try to answer it in the chat, that would be great.
Right now or later? Sorry,
yeah, if you want to answer it now in the chat, otherwise, like I said, I'll hold on to it and we'll come back to it so you can think.
Opportunities for more use of what's called climate smart farming, care for our soils. No, there's a long list of, this is where we need science to create resilient varieties. So there's incredible opportunities here to address this, the challenge to our food system. So no, I mean, this is an opportunity to even talk about science and the value of genetically engineered crops, because we have an audience, they're listening to us hopefully about food. So no, there's a whole other side to this equation, and that's solutions.
Yeah, it's a good point. All right, so we're going to move on to our next presenter, Patty Montano. Do you have a visual you want to share, or if you want to just say something for a couple of seconds, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll screen share.
Great.
Go. Let's get this full screen. Yeah, so I'm just presenting the title slide to my presentation just to, get those memories going to what I talked about for this We Are Water project, where we listen to community voices in order to steer the direction and content of programs and this exhibit that we are just in the blueprint stage of developing. And it's just to show that water critical and scarce in this Four Corners region, which here's an image just to orient you as to what we mean by the Four Corners, that it connects communities through our shared place and unique stories. So really centering on this personal and community connection with water and listening to what people said. So I'll just go to this next slide so that you can just see quickly what communities in the Four Corners want people to know about water in their region and what they said. And here's a really cool quote from one person that really kind of sums it up, that water is an important part of their social and economic fabric of their community, and that we need to treat water with respect and admiration. And really that water is life for them and is such an important part of their everyday life, their health and their community. And so Katie and I worked on this needs assessment, and that was surveys and interviews to listen to these community perspectives and community connections. And so that was all part of this collaborative design process, which is it's just a way of thinking about developing, let's say, informal STEAM programs and exhibits in particular in this case, and just having communities really be at that center. So instead of us as scientists from a university picking what science topics are important and designing there, we put that to the side and put communities and what their connections are at the center and listen to them, and then use our science to support those stories. So this is just a summary slide of sort of what that means, making informed decisions. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Patty, for summarizing that. Does anyone have any questions for Patty?
Katie, it's Bonnie. It's more a comment than a question.
Yeah.
That I want to make you aware that NASA Applied Sciences worked with the Navajo people and developed a tool to help with water management. And so that might be really interesting to share with some of the communities that you were highlighting in that region. So it's in our agenda, but I'll have to find it and I'll send you the link, Katie. I can't share because I'm not on my computer, but I'll send it to you and you can share it in the chat.
Oh,
definitely.
Please do,
Yeah.
Bonnie.
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you so much. Great. Any other questions or comments for Patty? And if you do have one, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll try to come back to it, or she can try to answer it in the chat as well. I'll try to just keep us moving here though, if that's all right with everyone. Let's see who is next on my list down here. Zoe Fleming, would you mind, if you have a visual you can share? If not, you can just talk a little bit about your project. And Zoe, just so everyone know, had to miss on Friday. So this is a great chance to ask her any questions if you had any.
Hi, can you see? Oh no, I need to make it bigger, don't I? Hi everyone. So I'm Zoe Fleming. I'm working in Chile. Been living in Chile for 2.5 years. I'm originally from the UK. And I'm a researcher in mostly air pollution. But I did kind of on the side, I do a lot of outreach on the side of my research. I went into schools in Chile, and the project was to kind of talk about sensors and kind of instrumentation in schools to do with climate. But we were quite rushed in deciding on how to do the project. So I was told, like, in 2 months' time, you need to start a project. You have to decide what to measure, what sensors to use. So it was all very fast. Then Chile had a social revolution last October, so the schools all closed, and then we had a pandemic. So hopefully someday I can try it out a bit better. But we used Arduino and meteorological instruments, meteorological sensors, a kit that was about $40, and they put them together. Actually, I've got a lot of text on here, so maybe I'll just go to some photos. Yeah, so the kids, it was a group of 16-year-olds, girls' school, public school, so not many resources in the school. In their kind of chemistry class, we put together the sensors, got them running, taught them how to download the data, and then they were just starting to do experiments where they were walking around the school, maybe going in and out of the sun, looking at the difference indoors, outdoors, and their plan was to do a project where they'd walk around the city, taking measurements, and then compare it with maybe air quality measurements or some of the Met station measurements, and basically design an experiment. And so it was thinking about the scientific method. If they had an instrument that could do things, just kind of manipulating the data. And I feel like the science kind of came alive for them, more than day to day in their science classes. There really are very few resources there. I mean, even getting 3 computers in the class was hard work. So they're not used to data, they've never seen Excel. But I think I kind of taught them that science is about curiosity, it's about using our imagination, it's about adapting or trying to understand some social things in the context of science. And I think it was going in the right direction, but it's still a work in progress.
Yeah. I'm going to try and cut you off there if that's all right. And again, we can always come back to this towards the end. I hope we have some more time for discussion, or I'm planning to have more time for discussion. Does anyone have any questions for Zoe?
I do, but I'm going to defer in case someone else does. I've already had my question go in. If there's time, I'll ask one.
Thanks, Jim. You can put it in the chat too. It's another way to kind of keep the conversation going to help us save some time.
Yep.
Anyone else?
If no one else has one, I'm just curious, Zoe, have you connected with folks at NCAR who have the printable weather station based on Arduino and have been also bringing that into different communities around the world?
No, I haven't actually. I mean, I was working more in the research of the local centers about 4 or 5 years ago, and maybe it's new since then or something. But yeah, I don't know, maybe you could put in the chat like who, the website or who to contact. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great. So let's move on to our next speaker, Maggie Hensel, you're next on my list. Would you mind if you have a visual sharing it and telling us a little bit about your project?
Sure. Thanks so much. All right, great. Can you see that?
Yeah.
All right, great. So my name is Maggie Hensel, and I'm a master's student in environmental studies at UMass Lowell. And basically, I've been working on trying to understand how the world climate simulation impacts students who are underrepresented in STEM fields. And the world climate simulation is like an interactive role play simulation where participants negotiate a global climate agreement, and they go through several iterations. So they negotiate an agreement, they enter it into a model called C-ROADS, and then they see the impacts of their decisions. They see whether they reach 2 degrees C or not, and then they essentially go back and renegotiate an agreement, and they keep doing that until they reach their goal. And previous research on the world climate simulation has shown that it allows students to think and feel for themselves and essentially learn for themselves about climate change. And so this research was a qualitative study which looked to better understand the social interactions, because there's a big social component. And in the literature, collective efficacy or working together is often a barrier to climate action. So I wanted to look at how these social interactions could really help to influence motivation. And essentially what we found is that these social interactions played a big role, and that through individuals working together, they actually kind of believed that they could work together to make a difference in the climate sphere. So these were just high school and college level students, but it really helped to engage them in a non-traditional like active learning style, as well as to increase their understanding and urgency towards climate change. And so yeah, that's a little bit about my research, and I'll stop there.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions for Maggie? I think there's a comment in the chat for you. I think it's less of a question, more of a comment.
Yeah. Yes.
Great. Any other questions? And I think you did a nice job really summarizing it. And I know you got some questions in our Q&A. So if anyone does have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm going to just keep us moving along here. Next on my list, Valerie, Casa Santo, would you share your visual, please?
Yes, hi. I'm Valerie, and I'm coming to you from Annapolis, Maryland, the ancestral homes of the Pamunkey and Piscataway nations. And I put in the chat, to save time, a visual from NASA's visualization studio of Antarctica and the bedrock underneath. And I'm working with a researcher who studies penguin colonies using satellite data. I actually work for the ISAT, the NASA ISAT-2 mission, which launched 2 years ago and uses lasers to measure the height of the ice, as well as land, water, and trees. We're working with Michael to engage diverse audiences using NASA's NASA's tactile books. They have a bunch of them out there. I have one here. Can you all see me? Can you all see this book as well?
Let me stop this too, and then
yeah.
Easier.
So basically, the books were designed for seeing impaired, but they are great for everybody actually to touch and feel the surfaces. So this is the Gale crater, and you can feel the different surfaces and the rim and the central peak, as well as the height profile. And these books are great because you can actually talk about the crater formation. So in our case, we will be contributing to the Earth book with the Arctic and Antarctica, Greenland and Antarctica. And for the Antarctica portion, we will be highlighting major penguin colonies as well. So there will be many different types of information that will be conveyed in the tactile book, both the emotional connection through the wildlife, and as well as the topography, both the bedrock underneath Antarctica, which can play a role in how the ice melts and how it flows, as well as the ice on top of the land. Our satellite is basically getting a 3D data of heights. So we will also want to convey this to diverse audiences and use multimodalities approach, which touching, feeling, vision, and also audio in the field, sounds of the penguins and interaction like that. So yeah, I encourage you to look at the full paper, and if anyone is interested in more, feel free to get in touch. Thanks.
Thank you, Valerie, so much. Let's see, I think there might have been a comment that came in the chat for you as well. Does anyone have any questions for Valerie? You can just speak up or put it in the chat. And if no one's going to speak up right away, I am going to try and keep us moving along because I want to have at least 20 minutes for our discussion at the end here. So Rule, I think you're our last presenter. Would you mind sharing your visual and talking a little bit about your project?
Yeah, I'll do that. Let me just put my visual on screen. So there it is, right? Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm from the Netherlands, Rotterdam, the Netherlands, and in October I defended my PhD dissertation on digital edutainment. And I basically studied how people organize online in digital media networks. You're probably all familiar with the term, the filter bubble or the echo chamber. So I've developed these kind of methods to identify where we can find these filter bubbles or echo chambers. Yeah, what I learned from it is that in these networks, we can find collaboration partners, content creators, basically, that you can involve in creating media campaigns. And you can do this, for example, also in a participatory fashion, where you kind of invite stakeholders from different bubbles to create something together. And you really build this social efficacy, what Maggie was also mentioning before. So that's it in a nutshell. And yeah, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Rule? Questions? Wonderful. Well, I'm sure that we may have more come out through the discussion, and that's what I wanted to leave the last bit for. Before we do that, I'm going to put this link in the chat again. I was trying to collect all the contact information that I could in the chat into this document, and I'm also going to try and take some notes from our discussion as well, and this can be a nice resource for folks from the session if you want to use this afterwards. And I wanted to really quickly just sort of mention a couple of things here. So I didn't feel like I often like to kind of do group norms for discussion. I feel like we don't have a lot of time to really come up with group norms in this 1 hour session. So I wrote a couple that I think are generally good rules to follow in discussion, and that we should try to follow. And if you have any others that you would like to, like our group to follow today, or if you object to any of these, please speak up or put it in the chat. But generally, you know, trying to make your questions relevant to the larger audience now. But if you do have specific questions, we can also do that. I think we'll have a little more time. This was thinking kind of, you know, for more general discussion to begin with, though. So also use mute button and hand raise function. Actually, I don't know if we have the hand raise function in the Zoom room, but basically, you know, try to make it known you want to speak, and then wait for your turn. Just because Zoom can be hard to try to interrupt folks. And you know, just if you're somebody who tends to speak a lot, try to maybe reduce that a little bit. And if you're somebody who doesn't speak a lot, speak up a little bit. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And with that, I have a couple of questions. We do not have to follow these, but these were some of the questions that I thought were kind of relevant. I'd love to talk about like themes we saw across all of these projects, or you know, what has made things successful. What are some of the strategies that we might be able to use out of this? These were some of the questions I thought of that we could discuss. We do not have to follow this though. So any other thoughts? Does anyone have other questions they'd like to discuss, or just thoughts they'd like to bring up?
Katie, this is Bonnie. I'd like to add a thought to the
Oh yeah, the norms. I did.
rules of engagement. That's what I kind of call it. The rules
Past
of
that.
engagement.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Bonnie.
And that is to respect Indigenous knowledge and cultures. And so, you know, it's not always thought of in the Western world, but if an idea is discussed and you think it's a great idea, you need to go and talk to the person who brought up the idea about using that idea. So just, you know, that the respect for that Indigenous knowledge and cultures. Just because the idea was shared doesn't mean you can run with it. And that doesn't seem like anybody would do that, but it really does happen a lot. It just, you forget who said what or something like that. And so, and you end up using someone else's idea in a way that they never intended it for it to be used. So I
Thank you, Bonnie.
That point up.
That's a really important one. I really appreciate that. Did anyone else have any other what did you call it? Rules of engagement that they'd like to add to this list? And I see some discussions already happening in the chat. So if not, we can move to, like I said, these were some of the questions I had. I can bring these into the chat if we want, and then I can stop sharing so we can have a little more of actual informal discussion and engagement here. And did I ever put the notes document, the link to that in? I can do that again as well.
Oh, hi. This is a question for Maggie. I believe, Maggie, were you the one who did the presentation on water, We Are Water, or was that someone else?
That was Patty, Patricia
Oh,
Patricia
Patty, sorry.
Montano.
Yeah. Hi,
Okay,
Valerie.
Patty. Hi, nice to see you. I love what you're doing, and so many times we go into, different communities and just, what we have and not, find out what that specific audience actually needs. So I think that's wonderful what you're doing. And what did you find from your communities you were working with, that what were their needs, or how was the response to your approach?
Yeah, and those are good questions. I think what we found that there is this really deep, already existing knowledge about water that these communities have, that that we can put a label of science on there, a science understanding of it. And I think that that was something that really our group came to realize, and we knew it was there, but we didn't know to the extent that it was there. And I know Katie can attest to that. And so I think, we learned a lot from communities, and what was surprising is how much they taught us and changed how we thought of creating a science, an informal science experience. And just to your question of like what they taught us, and I think we learned that there are these, common issues with water, like drought, across the region. But we also learned that there are, community differences. For instance, and the Navajo Nation, that yes, there is a greater problem with accessing water, drinkable water, and that families have to travel, long distances in order to obtain water, fill their trucks, and then, go home. And the pandemic itself, because of the need for having water in order to wash your hands, just has really worsened the existing inequities with water access and also water quality. Because in the Navajo Nation, unlike maybe neighboring towns, there is a very big concern with contamination from the uranium and also arsenic. That neighboring towns, it's not at the top of their list because it's not in their experience. So we see that there are these like common themes, but then also specific water concerns, community by community. Yeah, does that help?
Thank you so much for sharing, Patty. I think it's so important. I think actually that to me brings back a larger point that I see across a lot of these projects. Is that idea of the focus. We come in with our science, we want to talk about climate change and the future of water, and how much less water will be in the region. And we learned, as Patty mentioned, so much about their concerns of water were more about access and quality, and these other issues that we may not sometimes think about when we're in our academic bubbles. And I just think it's so important, especially on a topic like climate change, to get out of those bubbles and talk to communities and realize what's really important and what, how we can actually engage with them and help them. And there's some really great stuff going on in the chat too. So thanks everyone for that. I'm going to try and capture that in these notes a little bit later if I can. So other thoughts, questions anyone has for the whole group? Oh, Rule, thank you. You raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, just to connect with what you just said about bubbles, how important it is to talk with people outside of the academic bubble. This can also be applied in media strategies. Is my experience. So I've been involved in a project where we try to get people to discuss DNA technology, and we had academics visiting podcast shows that were hosted by hip hop artists, for example. And it is maybe a little bit weird if you as an academic come to a studio like that, and you will have a completely different talk than you will probably expect. But it is really important to really have a conversation with them on their conditions. And yeah, that's what I just wanted to share.
And a really great question came in through the chat is, how do we translate sort of the knowledge, the things we're trying to do of raising awareness, increasing knowledge around climate and climate change. How do we kind of translate that into action and people, changing behaviors? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Yeah, Emily, go ahead.
Thoughts. So I kind of think it is like input and then like output sometimes. And I think when we get into the transmedia communication that Rule specializes in and entertainment education brings in, I think we end up like with these iterative feedback cycles. And I would love to see just a lot more structure for the citizen science providing input, and then some of the media producers to some extent actually providing some of the output, because for the kinds of some of the media production is really expensive to produce. So I think that there is definitely a space to see things that are sort of designed in real time, that are produced by lots of different people. But I also think that there's a role somewhere in that ecosystem where we get artists commissioned to produce, larger productions. And I think that improving the speed of that whole cycle is going to help us respond more quickly to the whole scope of engagement issues.
Mm-hmm. That's a really important point. Other thoughts? I know you all work in so many different spaces. What do you do to try to improve beyond just sort of the knowledge aspect? What do you do to try to really influence people in their behavior?
Well, Katie, maybe I can offer a couple of comments.
Yeah.
And the topic of food is so relevant to all of us. So we're taking multiple pathways and trying to engage the entire food supply chain. So the consumer, the producer, the processor, the retailer, et cetera. I mean, that is our aspiration. But if you're a producer, you're already feeling the effects of climate change. If you are someone who takes ingredients from around the world, you need to be aware of what change is occurring for the sake of your business. So I think there's some real opportunities. We look more global at the food system. And the approach we're taking is there are no villains in this system. We all eat. We all need to come together. Whether you're in the business or you're a consumer, whatever it might be, and actually build a sense of community around this whole topic.
Yeah.
We're slowly making progress.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think food's a very common thing that we can all come together around. Any other thoughts? I was actually going to even say to Zoe, to me, some of this I think gets at your work as well, of sort of like engaging students, and they're going beyond kind of just thinking about climate change to really like, making their own measurements and thinking about it in their local spaces. I think that's another thing we talk about in my group a lot, that place-based kind of education can be so important. Do you have any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I know, and also my experience from moving from the developed world to the developing world, like the lack of resources maybe in the developing world, and I think we need to be sharing the resources with them. And also we're explaining it in a different way. So for example, in Santiago, which is a city of 7 million people with an air pollution problem, also urban heat island, kind of really, all the poor people are living in the warmer parts of town. I think there are lots of issues that maybe they haven't realized are related to climate change that we can talk about. And they're things that actually people with little education know about. They know that they're living in uncomfortable conditions, and it seems to be getting worse every year. So I think taking these measurements makes them understand. Some of them, well, maybe 2 years ago, not many people had heard of climate change, and then the COP was supposed to be in Chile, and that helped. Yeah, I think these interactive things, because it's not the interactive things as well, from what I realized doing fieldwork with kids, it's not telling you that you have to be clever to go and find out more about climate change. It's kind of, it's hands-on activities excite people, and they can maybe learn better that way.
Definitely, yeah. Other thoughts or ideas? The other person I was thinking, and please do not feel like I'm putting anyone on the spot. If you want to pass, totally fine. But Maggie, you kind of talked about some of these ideas of like social norms and such in your talk, if I remember correctly. I don't know if you had any thoughts on this one.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about this question, and I think one of the things I've realized from this work is that the knowledge of impacts, so sort of like Mike was talking about, like how people are impacted is important. However, the goal is not to scare people or make them feel like it's a problem that's too big to accomplish. So creating a community where people can work together and essentially believe that it is possible and they can make a difference is important. So it's like that balance of grounding the knowledge of impacts with also providing, like really connecting it with a pathway. And through the World Climate Simulation, we do this through people interacting with one another, and it's a group experience. But I think there are a bunch of different ways in order to help make that connection a little bit stronger between the knowledge, as well as like kind of grounding it in hope and not leading down this path of helplessness. So that's
Definitely.
sort of where I was kind of thinking how to kind of address this issue.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Rule put something in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to expand on that at all or say anything about that.
I said it in the chat. I think Emily was raising her hand.
Yeah, Emily, you can go ahead. If I was like, I think you said it in the chat too, but if you wanted to expand, I just wanted to give you the chance.
I think Maggie's point is really good, and then we'll come back to Rule. Maggie, when I work with the literary communities, they are so stuck, even as we try to curate those stories, like developing intellectual art databases or help guide the various screenwriters or fiction writers, they're still stuck in this dystopian fiction. And so if we can collectively design resources to help people get through that gap, even the people who are just sharing and telling the stories, I think we're going to make a lot more headway there. So yeah, Maggie, thanks so much for bringing that up. I think that's a great point. I'll pass it to you next, Rule.
Yeah, feel free to add to any of that, Rule, if you want. I feel like he was kind of trying to pass the buck to you. Did you want to say anything more?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what Emily said before about the dystopian storytelling. There's this philosopher from Croatia, and he says that a good story always has this dialectical tension between hope and fear, and they both need each other to drive societies forward. And he gives Star Trek as an example. He says in the narrative world of Star Trek, once they discover outer space and other species in space, the perspective of people changes, and they stop having wars at Earth, right? Because they have another enemy, another other. And I think this is what storytelling can do. It can change your perspective, and this dialectic of hope and fear can kind of drive it forward in general, whereas these looped iterations that Emily was referring to, and that I try to illustrate with the marker example that I shared in the chat, can really give body to such a strategy.
Yeah.
Raul and Emily, what would you think of this? If there are times we can do just those, and there are times that we can go even further. If we expand it to hope and what was the first one? It's scariness and hope, you know. And then if we can add in action or them being part of the story, inviting them into the story as involvement, then you know that you can now be in Star Trek. You can now affect the outcome. That goes so far in taking it away from gloom and doom, because when we have no power, when we're just kids or regular people, and it's all these things are happening, we're doing, then it's scary and it's just depressing. But as soon as you can take action and that make a difference, now it's yours, and it changes the whole emotional landscape.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's a really good point, Jim. Thank you so much. We only have a couple minutes left, but I'd love to just open it up to any of the folks who maybe haven't said anything yet. I know, Danielle, that you are sort of a co-presenter with Mike, and we haven't heard from you. I don't know if you had any thoughts you wanted to share at the end here.
There's so many exciting connections in here. So building on the idea of storytelling, that's been something that I've been looking into, kind of beyond the work that Mike and I are doing with our book and our website, and really trying to find a way to get people involved in telling the story of climate change through food. So we're hoping to tap into social media networks like Instagram or TikTok, where people can help co-create their experiences of climate change through the foods that they interact with on a daily basis. But then also, I teach communication courses in environment, science, and health. And so I'm looking for so many projects and things. So there's lots of great ideas here. So I don't want to take up more time, but thank you.
Yeah, you're totally fine. And I know I see so many overlaps here, like you were just talking about that, storytelling. A lot of folks have been talking about storytelling, and I'll just mention that in the We Are Water project, just because I am on that with Patty, I do know that that's a big focus of that project as well. We've been, working a lot with communities around trying to, get their stories and have them tell stories about water. And that's been, good. Patty, did you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, I just think it's a great connector for other people in the region to hear from people who could be their neighbors, who could be that person they know, down the street, or who have a, live in an area and share similar experiences as they do. So we love to highlight those stories and really have those be at the center.
Yeah. And then we have one more minute, and I think the only person we didn't hear from on this question was Valerie. So I just wanted to give her a space if you wanted to say anything, and you do not have to, but I just want to give everyone space if they want.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thanks. No, I just wanted to stress the importance of hands-on and really connecting with folks where they are. So an example is, we used to do a lot of live events in DC, Washington, DC, and you have the beautiful mall area. And we would talk about ice loss and have a hands-on about that, and talk about how we're losing something like 328 gigatons a year of ice off of Greenland alone, not to mention how much we're losing off Antarctica. But people can't connect with that because it's such a large measurement. So I basically told them about how it's actually 1 gigaton of ice would be the equivalent of the National Mall, from the Capitol building to the Washington Monument, 10 Washington monuments high. So they're like, wow. And then really something clicked in their head where we were right there on the mall. They could see it, they could visualize it. And it just really was this great moment where I made it this connection. So I just wanted to stress that importance of that, your place-based and your connection with people. So thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Valerie. And to me, that ties back in with Jim's work that we started with. And anyways, I just love all the different connections around all these different projects. I thank you all so much for engaging with us at AGU and doing this extra discussion session. I hope you all thought it was valuable. I thought it was really neat to hear some of the larger thoughts and themes that kind of cross all these different projects. And I would encourage y'all to stay in touch. We'll continue conversations, and I think some of the last comments also get at these, how do we continue doing this in virtual space, and how do we do this going forward, knowing that things will change as well. And I think we're having some of those conversations on the Clean Network, so I'd encourage you to join us there. And then I will also put in finally the notes document again, and feel free to add to that again, put your content, fix it if I've gotten it wrong. And if you want to add to the discussion notes as well, that would be great. And I will put the link to the Clean Network in also.
Katie, can I ask you one favor? Can you put the link to that document in the email and just send it out by email as well, so I can transfer to my NASA computer contribute to the notes there. Thanks.
Definitely. I can send it out through emails or anything else anybody needs from me that I should put into that email. I'll put the notes document. I'll put a link to the Clean Network. Any other things that you think?
This one, Katie, I don't, maybe this is always okay, but the chat is always such a great thing. Do we need permission for people to share it? And can we get it, or because it's just so much is in that chat?
That's actually a really great point, Jim. And I think also Patrick and I, as I mentioned, work on the Clean Network, and we post recordings of our calls there. And we were wondering if we could post a recording for this. I think it's really relevant. I think people there would appreciate it. And we usually post the chat text file with the recordings of those. So yeah, is everybody comfortable with this being shared publicly, the recording of this and the chat? And if you're not and you don't want to speak up, just send me an email and we can wait on posting that. But if you're all pretty well okay with it, if you can, yeah, do some sort of thumbs up or nod. Seems like most people are. So we're going to kind of go on the route that we will post it and get things out for people, and I will send you all the link to that. So if you're not, though, please just send me an email today or tomorrow and let me know so that because we'll probably get going on that pretty soon. So thank you all so much. I know we're a couple minutes over, but I really just appreciate you all engaging with us. I thought we had some really nice presentations, some really great presenters, and I'm really glad we all came together to talk about it.
Katie and Emily, I'm so glad you had this idea. I'm thanking both of you because I'm not sure where it grew from, but I came in afterwards and it was a great idea to have this extra session. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Bonnie, and helping. And Patrick and Emily, thanks to everyone for joining.
Good to see you, Valerie.
Good to see everyone.
I hope you do the same for your other session, which was awesome. A session like this. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is good for virtual AGU to do things like this. Like this has been really great. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Valerie, it's good to see you. Just want to say hi while we're here.
Good to see you too, Bonnie. Thank you so much for your wonderful example.